The sun had barely dipped behind the highway when the chaos began, shattering glass, a strangled cry, and the trembling figure of a young waitress stumbling out of the diner's back door. Her cheek was swollen, her breath broken, and her hands shaking so badly she could hardly push open the screen. And then she saw him, a broad-shouldered biker in a black leather jacket, patched with the unmistakable red-winged skull of the Hell's Angels. She didn't hesitate. She ran straight to him, clutching his vest with the desperate grip of someone on the edge of breaking. And with a cracked whisper that barely carried through the wind, she begged him to hide her from her husband. In that instant, the world seemed to hold its breath, and everything that happened next would leave the entire town stunned. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the courage to stand up for what's right, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly helps stories like this reach more hearts. Her name was Lily, and she had been working at the roadside diner for 3 years. Most people saw her as the girl who always smiled while pouring coffee, the girl who remembered everyone's usual order. What no one saw were the bruises she covered with makeup, the fear she tucked beneath her apron, or the nights she stayed late just to avoid going home. Her husband, Mark, was once charming until life hardened him into a man full of anger and suspicion. Every mistake she made, every minute she came home late, every stranger who so much as looked at her became an excuse for another outburst. And tonight, after a slow shift and forgetting to send him a message, he stormed into the diner, drunk and wild, shoving chairs and screaming until the world around them fell silent. What he didn't expect was that someone else would be there, someone the whole town avoided making eye contact with. His name was Riker, a Hell's Angels biker passing through after a long ride between states. To most, he was a thread leather, tattoos, the kind of man rumored to settle problems without words. But in truth, he was simply weary, quiet, and more observant than people realized. He had seen Lily before that night, always noticing the way she tried to shrink herself, the way her smile never reached her eyes. So when she ran to him, bruised and terrified, he didn't flinch. He stepped in front of her, shielding her with a silent but immovable certainty. Mark's rage only grew when he saw her hide behind another man. He charged forward, shouting, but Riker didn't lift a hand. He simply stood there, towering like a wall Mark could not break, absorbing every push without reacting. It wasn't violence that stopped Mark, it was the calm, intimidating stillness of a man who had seen far worse than drunken fury. And when Mark swung his fist, the biker caught his wrist midair with a grip firm enough to make him freeze, then quietly told him to walk away before he regretted what came next. Something in Riker's voice, low, steady, almost frighteningly controlled, made Mark back off and spit curses as he retreated to his truck. Once Mark was gone, Lily collapsed against the counter outside the diner. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't mean to drag anyone into her problems. But Riker didn't see her as a problem. He saw her as someone who had run out of places to turn. Without asking anything in return, he walked her inside, sat her at a booth, and brought her ice, wrapped in a kitchen towel. The diner was nearly empty now, the evening sun casting long shadows across the floor as she sat trembling, shoulders hunched, heart still racing. He told her she didn't need to explain anything, but the moment she felt safe, her story poured out like water from a cracked dam. She spoke about the early days when Mark was gentle, the promises he made, the dreams they had. Then she shared the slow unraveling, the drinking, the jealousy, the anger that grew like a storm inside him. Riker didn't interrupt or judge, he just listened. And in that quiet listening, Lily felt a kind of safety she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she realized how exhausted she truly was, how tired she had become of surviving instead of living. Riker knew pain. He had seen it in places most people would never understand. He knew what it meant to feel trapped, to carry burdens too heavy for one person. And he knew something else: no one escapes alone. So he offered a choice. Not protection for one night, not a hiding place for a moment, but a chance to leave. A real chance. When his club rode out the next morning, they could take her to a shelter 2 towns over. A safe house connected to people who didn't ask questions but always opened their doors. The thought terrified her. Running meant change. Running meant facing a future she had never imagined. But when Mark returned an hour later, angrier, louder, and even more reckless, her fear gave way to a sudden, desperate resolve. He stormed through the diner again, roaring her name, kicking tables, yelling threats. And that's when Lily realized she couldn't survive another night before Mark could reach her. Riker stepped between them once more, but this time he didn't let Mark walk away. He made him understand, with nothing but a cold stare, that Lily was no longer his to control. The sheriff arrived minutes later, tipped off by someone who heard the commotion. Mark was taken away for public disturbance and suspected domestic assault. And as the diner slowly calmed, Lily found herself standing under the dim neon lights, the night air cool against her bruised cheek, wondering how her life had reached this point. But when she looked at Riker, she didn't see danger or trouble. She saw a lifeline she never expected. That night, she packed a small bag, nothing more than clothes and a few photos she couldn't leave behind. She didn't say goodbye to anyone except the diner's owner, who hugged her tightly and promised she always had a place to return to. Then, with shaking hands but a growing sense of freedom, she climbed onto the back of Riker's motorcycle as the engines of the club rumbled softly under the rising moon. The ride wasn't loud or chaotic. It was strangely peaceful. The wind washed over her, carrying away the weight she had held onto for so long. By the time they crossed into the next county, Lily's tears were not from fear, they were from relief. That night, she arrived at a safe house where warm lights glowed through the windows and gentle voices welcomed her in. People she had never met treated her with kindness she had almost forgotten existed. Riker didn't stay long. He simply made sure she was safe, then handed her a small card with a number she could call if she ever needed help again. Not a promise, not pressure, just reassurance. As he turned to leave, she thanked him with a trembling voice, telling him he saved her life. He only shook his head and said she saved her own. He just showed up when she finally chose to stand. If this story moved your heart even a little, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us share more emotional stories like this with the world. Before the story ends, I have a small request. Please comment below what part of Lily's journey touched you the most. Lily went on to rebuild her life piece by piece. She found work, made new friends, and slowly learned how to breathe without fear. And though the road wasn't easy, she walked it with strength she never knew she had. Riker continued his travels, never expecting anything in return. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, Lily would hear the distant roar of motorcycles passing through town and smile not with sadness but with gratitude. Because one night, when she had nowhere left to turn, a stranger in a leather jacket became the unexpected hero who changed everything.